Good morning. It is so peaceful and quiet, and there's no wind, and the colors are beautiful. There's a dark cloud on the ridge over there that the sun's gonna have to get past. I'm not really sure what's going on, but it is amazing. I'm glad I made it out for us. Now we're all together. All right, I have been trying to upload chapter 1, and it says it's 5 hours. It's not. It's 53 minutes. It won't upload. So I'm either going to have to reread, but I'm going to continue where I was in case I get it uploaded. And then, yippee-yay, we will have all the information in one place, where all you have to do is push play. I appreciate you. Thank you for being with me today. All right, more words. Pichaya Satyam soon realized was a Communist Party member. Being a student was only a cover for his party work, which included recruiting new members and sympathizers from the college. Pichaya introduced Satyam to two men who, like him, had been inspired by Pichaya's accounts of the Telangana armed struggle. These were Manika Rao and Hanumaya, two young lecturers at the college. Meeting these men made Satyam feel lucky to have chosen to go to AC College after all. Had he gone to Hindu college, he would have had no dearth of friends. His old high school friends had all ended up there, and plenty of opportunity for political activity as a leader in the Youth Congress. Excuse me, Lord. But the new friends he made at AC College were worth more than his old ones. He looked up to them, and they opened a new world for him. Hanumaya came from the low Vadira caste. He was a brilliant philosophy lecturer, and like Satyam, he had a great love for Telugu literature, especially poetry. Manika Rao was an untouchable Christian from Guntur, one of the traditional Christians the town was known for. His father was a reverend, not a two-bit pastor like the one Satyam had known in his childhood, who preached in makeshift churches with no furniture, or toured the villages collecting eggs, vegetables, and dung cakes for their services. Manika Rao's family was highly educated, highly cultured, and well off compared to other untouchables. At the age of 23, Manika Rao had read the Bible, both Old and New Testament, from cover to cover 23 times. Now that he was a communist, he would never look at that book again. Handsome and well-built, he was as good a volleyball player as he was a mathematics lecturer. Here comes the sun. Though older than he was, these men treated Satyam as a peer, and like Pichaya, neither of them minded Satyam's poverty. Hanumaya came from a poor family like Satyam's own, while Manika Rao was too noble to judge anyone by wealth or social status. After Pichaya introduced Satyam to Hanumaya and Manika Rao, the three of them saw less and less of Pichaya. Excuse me. After all, he was a party member and had important work to do. Only once in a while would he come around to check on his recruits. He would ask them what they were reading and suggest new books for them. But Satyam started meeting Hanumaya and Manika Rao regularly. In the evenings, the three friends would sit on the lawn in front of Satyam's hostel and talk about philosophy. Manika Rao would initiate these discussions. Hanamaya would give explanations since he was the philosophy lecturer. Satyam's role was to ask questions. Their talk would touch on various topics, including problems of ethics and metaphysics, but their reflections invariably led them to questions of political philosophy, questions such as, what is communism? What is socialism? Is there a difference? Hanamaya explained that there were two types of socialism, utopian and scientific. Utopian socialism was based on the idea that equality is a just and compassionate thing, whereas scientific socialism, also called communism, was much like physics or chemistry or maths. 2 plus 2 is always 4. No justice or compassion is involved in this determination. Likewise, when human societies, in their development from cave-dwelling clans, finally reach a certain historical stage, their members inevitably come to share equally in what is produced. Satyam found Hanamaya's exposition of scientific socialism appealing, but Satyam had a lot of questions. If history is inevitably developing in the direction of a socialist society, why does one need to fight for it? Hanamaya explained that even though the progress toward socialism was a natural evolution, every transition from one stage to another caused a lot of violence and disruption. The old privileged classes did not want to make way for a new class coming to power. It was something like birth pangs. Though it's natural for a woman to give birth, it is still painful. Satyam was amazed by this way of thinking, and one can look at society, the people in it, the things they do, in the same manner as a natural process that can be studied in a science lab. Hanamaya explained to Satyam and Manika Rao about how the struggle between classes and society is reflected in something called ideology, in ideas and culture. Under the right conditions, the spread of certain ideas could in turn spur social change. This line of thinking made Satyam reflect on how the culture around him was changing. He thought of the novelist Chalam, whose books were causing a sensation in Telugu society. Chalam was the first to reveal the shocking fact that women have physical desires and take part in sex not only for the sake of their husbands. Chalam also pointed out that women have brains and need to think for themselves. Here's what he wrote. Woman, too, has a body. It should be given exercise. Woman, too, has a mind. It should be given knowledge. Woman, too, has a heart. It should be given experience. His books were considered worse than pornography, but like pornography, many people who were quick to denounce them in public were keen to read them behind closed doors. Chalam, which is Chalam, was naturally associated with communism. After all, he was as bold and revolutionary as attractive and revolting. Everything exciting and progressive that was happening in those days, in the arts or social life, was associated with communism. Still, the Communist Party denounced Chalam. Under communism, women may be equal to men, but that didn't mean communists condoned promiscuity. Satyam agreed with the party about Chalam. Upon reading his novels, Satyam shuddered to think how he could ever look at Mahatma or Papa with the same eyes that had read that book. But he liked the idea of treating women as thinking creatures, and Chalam's style enchanted him. But for Satyam, the writer who best spoke for the spirit of his times was the revolutionary poet Siri Siri. It was Siri Siri who became Satyam's idol. Okay, S-R-I and then S-R-I again, so Sri Sri, maybe? Sri Sri was not a Marxist who wrote poetry in support of his politics. He was a poet who took up Marxism for the sake of his writing, in the struggles of the oppressed and the hope for a new egalitarian social order. Sri Sri found inspiration for the kind of poetry he wanted to write. Sri Sri was the one who had written A Different World, which Satyam remembered singing at the independence celebration. But though the poem had been adopted as an anthem for the nationalist movement, the author was actually writing about a truly new and better world, like the one that Satyam longed to see. When armed peasant struggle in Telangana broke out, Sri Sri's poems gave voice to the aspiration of the movement. Sri Sri's poetry was revolutionary, and not just in theme, but in form. He abandoned traditional versification, producing free verse with a strong colloquial rhythm. Chalam wrote that Sri Sri broke the back of classical meter and diction and Telugu verse. And Sri Sri went further than any other in making contemporary, everyday experience a subject of Telugu poetry. One of his poems begins. So here's the kind of stuff he writes. Little doggy, matchstick, bar of soap. Don't look down on them. They are all full of poetry. Piece of bread, banana peel, plank of wood. They go on, staring back at you, demanding that you find their depth. Sri Sri was invited by the student cultural clubs of AC College and Hindu College to speak on modern poetry. On the day of his speech, when word got out that the poet was resting in a room on campus, Satyam snuck past a throng of young admirers, lined up outside and tiptoed inside to stand by the bed. He stood and gazed at the poet's unusually wide forehead and marveled. There's like a little noise, like something's crawling through the grass or something. I'm waiting to see if the grass moves, and then I'll know where the little critter is, but there's some little critter making noises. All right, he stood and gazed at the poet's unusually wide forehead and marveled. This must show how intelligent he is, and no wonder if he writes like that. That evening, the auditorium was full. Hundreds stood for lack of seats, and hundreds more gathered outside the door in the hope of catching the great man's words. Sri Sri's oration lacked the thunder that was in his verse. He mumbled disconnected sentences. The students turned to one another in disbelief. Everyone wondered if he could be an imposter. I think I spotted the noisemaker. It is a Roadrunner. So I'm in their territory. Okay, we continue. Hang on, let me get a little drink. Getting a little cold. Sorry about the ding ding. All right. Sensing the restlessness in the room, Sri Sri told the story. There once was a famous sculptor. When invited to deliver a speech on the art of sculpture, he pulled the veil off one of the sculptures and said, "This is my speech." Then Sri Sri recited a long poem, beginning Posy, oh, Posy. When he reached the end, he announced, "This is my speech." The audience was silent, mesmerized. Before he left, Sri Sri promised his fans a new poem to be called Mahaprasthanam, the Great Journey. "It will be very long," he said, "the length of a full-length mirror." Some months later, when Sri Sri's new book came out, Hanamaya, who had introduced Satyam to Sri Sri's poetry, gave Satyam the money to buy it. He raced out at once to a bookshop. That night he read the poem over and over, 100 times. When the sun came up, he fell asleep exhausted like a wounded soldier expiring on the battlefield. Hanamaya wanted to write essays, plays, and poetry in support of the revolution. Manika Rao, on the other hand, was interested in organizing struggles. And Satyam, the youngest, shared both the older men's interests and yet was more ambitious than either. He planned to combine in himself Sri Sri and Lenin. Write like Sri Sri, fight like Lenin. A pen and a gun. Every time Pichaya came to see Satyam, he asked the same questions. "When can I go to the guerrilla front?" Each time, Pichaya told him the time had not come yet. All right, and on to the next. 6 months after Satyam enrolled in AC College, on the afternoon of January 30th, 1948, a 70-year-old Gandhi was making his way to a prayer meeting, propped on the shoulders of his teenage grandnieces. He was weakened from days of fasting for an end to the communal violence resulting from partition, the division of British India into the independent states of India and Pakistan. Someone ran out of the crowd, pulled a pistol from his jacket pocket, and shot the old man 3 times. Gandhi fell to the ground, uttering the name of a Hindu god, Har Ram. Gandhi's killer was a Hindu, an early member of the fascist Hindu nationalist Rashtriya Swayamsevak Sangh, RSS, who believed Gandhi had betrayed all Hindus by agreeing to give up a portion of the subcontinent to the Muslims. At the news of Gandhi's death, people built memorials to him in hundreds of thousands of cities and towns and villages across India, wherever they could find 2 stones. If they didn't have time or means to carve a bust, they just went looking. They just went looking for a round stone that resembled his head. They set up shrines and performed pujas, which is Hindu rites. Students at AC College gathered on the campus and sang a song written by the great Congress poet, Thanetti. I'm going to skip the part where I try it in their language. The crazed men trained on us their pistols. Don't tell them, brother, that you are a man, a human being. They will kill us. The madness of communalism, the madness of lust, the depraved craze of the rulers. The communist poet Sri Sri wrote, "In the valley of tears, a ray of compassion. O Mahatma, what is the truth? What is the falsehood?" Despite the antipathy, Satyam had always felt for Gandhi, even when he was a Congress supporter. He now felt a kind of sadness he had never before known. But his grief did not last long. The next afternoon, when he ventured out of his room to get a cup of tea, he saw a huge commotion in front of the campus gate. A large crowd had gathered and were all looking up at a crazy man who had climbed the electric pole. It was the beggar who used to beg in front of the campus, wearing a Congress topi on his head and bearing in his hands a Congress flag. He was a disciple of Gandhi, and now, filled with overwhelming grief, he was ready to touch a live wire and kill himself. The students and staff gathered below, pleading with the beggar not to do it. The drama went on for hours. In the end, the crazy beggar came down, and from that day on, he did very well in his profession. In a few days, Gandhi's bones were turned to ash, and the ashes divided and distributed in equal portions to all the states of the Indian Republic. In accordance with Hindu rites, the ashes were to be sprinkled into the waters of sacred rivers. Satyam and his two friends decided to watch the absurd spectacle. They took a ticketless train ride to Vijayawada, where the government of Madras had organized a mass ritual on the banks of Krishna River. The crowd was so vast, one couldn't hope to get a look at what was going on. When Satyam's train was going over the bridge that spanned the river, he had a brilliant idea. He pulled the emergency chain. The train stopped for several hours, giving them a fine view of the chief minister carrying the little pot of ashes on his head toward the river as the Brahmin priests around him chanted mantras. Satyam's sister, Papa, was in Parnasa with her grandmother when the news of Gandhi's assassination came. Although Papa had only just turned 11, she was vigorously anti-Gandhi. She admired Bose, mostly for his looks. She was impressed by his light skin, his round chin, his red lips, and fat baby face. She thought Gandhi old, ugly, and why doesn't he wear proper clothes? As for Mahatma, she didn't like Gandhi either. She preferred Nehru, who for her was the personification of aristocracy. Because of these feelings, neither Mahatma nor Papa cried. But one thing Papa discovered was that if big leaders died, she got a holiday. Satyam and his friends were still waiting to receive assignments from the party. For reasons they did not understand, they hadn't even been taken in as members yet. For the time being, their talents and enthusiasm had no outlet. AC College had a beautiful auditorium with room for 1,000 people. Its stage was equipped with curtains, professional lighting, and a sound system. The College Cultural Association supplied costumes, makeup, and props to students who wished to put on performances under their auspices. Hannah Maya decided to write a play to be performed in this venue. one with a political message. Manika Rao would direct it. The play told the story of a king who oppressed his subjects, faced a revolt, and was made to flee. A thinly veiled retelling of the Telangana struggle. Since at that time respectable girls were not coming forward to act, Annamaya insisted that Satyam play the heroine, a lowly peasant woman who stands up to the king. "Only you are so beautiful," Annamaya told Satyam. "Only you are suitable for the role." Satyam was then still 17, neither tall nor short. He had thin limbs, thick curly hair, and big, tragic eyes. Satyam hesitated, but Manika Rao and Pichaya and Satyam's other friends all urged him on. The play was a big hit. Mainly everyone agreed thanks to Satyam's performance. The way he smiled and moved, people said he looked more feminine than any girl on campus. Satyam and Hanimura came to dominate the cultural program at AC College. They performed a dozen more plays, many based on the Bengali novels, sold in kiosks outside campus for 2 rupees each. Satyam and Hanimaya looked for Telugu works, and they could adapt for the stage, preferring out of both practicality and national pride to draw on sources in their own language. But just about the only novels written in Telugu at that time were short, sleazy ones, with titles like 3.5 Kisses, which sold on moving trains for only 1 rupee each. Through his acting, Satyam became known to all 3,000 students on campus. Girls admired him for representing their sex so well and so favorably. The popularity he earned satisfied his longing for recognition for the first time since high school. But his deepest wish was to go to Telangana to take up arms against the Doras and Nazim. He kept asking Pichaya to put in a word to the party on his behalf. All right, 15 pages left. A full year after independence, the tricolor flag of the Indian Republic had not yet replaced the banner of Asaf Jai dynasty. Over the Nazim's kingdom of Hyderabad, Deccan. Hyderabad was surrounded on all sides by Indian territory. Yet against all logic, the Nizam refused to join India. He declared his kingdom an independent state. India gave him time to reconsider. Meanwhile, the Telangana armed struggle continued to spread. Despite the atrocities of the police, the army, and the parliamentary razakers. On September 13th, 1948, the Indian Army finally undertook a direct invasion of Hyderabad. In a shockingly short time, the Asaf Jai army was defeated. The razakers surrendered. The Nizam had been deposed. The 224-year-old dynasty was no more. There was jubilation in Telangana. Many of the peasant guerrillas came out of hiding. The feudal order had been destroyed at last. The guerrilla heroes finally put down their precious rifles and went home to celebrate, to reunite with their families. But the Indian Army did not put down its guns. It immediately turned them on the peasants. This had been its real mission all along. The Nizam was annoying to India, but a popular uprising against landed property was intolerable, while the operation to oust the Nizam had taken only 4 days, the occupation of Telangana went on for 3 years. Over 2,000 fighters and their family members were killed, 300,000 tortured, 50,000 arrested, thousands more detained in concentration camps. Thousands of women were raped. Under the guns of the Indian troops, peasants were evicted. Under military and police security, the Doras came back to their paraganas, and the land that the peasants had seized from them was returned. The Telangana struggle was finally crushed, but for the abolition of Venti, its gains reversed. Okay, that sentence was rough. Let me try that again. The Telangana struggle was finally crushed, but for the abolition of Venti, its gains reversed. Yep, that was the second time. All right, hang on a second. Let me get a drink. Pichaya was the nucleus around which the group of 3 friends at AC College had formed. He had brought them together, told them what was taking place in Telangana. Then Pichaya, one day, disappeared. The 3 friends quickly concluded, "He's gone UG," which is underground. When a member took up work in aid of the armed struggle, he had to break off prior associations without notice to evade the police. Along with Pichaya, many other things disappeared. There were no more political discussions on the lawns of AC College, no more issues of Abhyudaya to read, no more communist books for sale, no more meetings of the literary club, such as the one at which Sri Sri was presented on campus. The Communist Party was outlawed. Their offices were shuttered, their publications banned. No one could utter a word about Telangana. It was said that these measures were necessary to keep order in the wake of Gandhi's assassination 8 full months before. Oh my Lord, there she comes. There she comes. Sorry if I make anybody a little sick there. It's still prettier here. The sun comes up every day. I like that about that sun. One of my favorite things. So bright and shiny and orange. I probably shouldn't be staring at it. Okay, where was I here? It was said that these measures were necessary to keep order in the wake of Gandhi's assassination 8 full months before. Even though it was not a communist who killed Gandhi, but a Hindu fascist. In fact, these measures were the reflection within Andhra of the vicious repression going on in Telangana. The campus was now closely watched. No one was allowed to enter the hostels who did not belong there. The watchmen observed their duties to the letter. They wouldn't even let the police enter the hostel without written permission from the principal. Pichaya would reappear on campus once every few months He said he was now living in Madras to keep out of reach of the police. There he was doing menial work for party leaders and living on money he got from his mother. Pichaya had no trouble entering the higher hall. The ancient watchman, the most vigilant watchman of them all, was friendly with Satyam and never barred his visitors. Simply because Satyam would say hello and ask after his children, no one else would do that. On these unannounced visits, Pichaya would give the three friends reports on the progress of the armed struggle, how the communist villages of Elamaru and Kataru were under the iron boots of the Malabar police, how peasants in those villages were rounded up and arrested by the hundreds, how women there were raped. About the rapes, Satyam noticed Pichaya would go into the greatest detail. He would start out saying, "This was no ordinary rape, no sir." Then he described how the saris were ripped off, how the blouses were torn open, how the women were pushed to the ground. After listening to a few of these reports, Satyam noticed that Pichaya showed a certain excitement at the thought of the rapes, which he was unable to conceal. It made Satyam recoil. Satyam would press Pichaya to introduce him to one of the underground communist leaders. Satyam imagined these heroes looked fierce like panthers, tall, lean, muscular, dark, with fiery eyes, a long mustache that curled up at the ends, a rifle slung over one shoulder, a cigarette burning between the lips. But Pichaya always put him off. After some time, Pichaya stopped visiting. The three friends would never see him again. Now that their only link to the party was broken, they would get no more reports on the struggle. But they remained devoted to the movement. They continued to operate as best they knew how, as an AC College party unit. Since their political activity, through plays, was now restricted, they decided to lead a struggle of their own. Manika Rao organized a conference in Guntur to discuss the demand for reservations from untouchable Christians. Reservations were a form of affirmative action to counter the effects of centuries of caste oppression. The untouchable leader, B.R. Ambedkar, had fought to include the right to reservations in the national constitution he drafted. Under these provisions, a proportion of government jobs and seats in government were reserved for untouchable candidates. But untouchable Christians were excluded from this policy as a sort of penalty for having left the Hindu fold. The rationale was that when untouchables convert to a religion that does not recognize caste, they are untouchables no longer and have no need of reservations. Manika Rao hoped to organize prominent Christian figures who could launch a movement to demand reservations for the untouchables left behind by this discriminatory government policy. With Satyam at his side, Manika Rao convened scores of religious leaders. He brought Roman Catholic and Protestant clergy together with teachers and principals from Christian schools. That conference set in motion dozens of further gatherings, but failed to encourage any outright agitation. The religious leaders were loath to take any action that had the slightest air of militancy. That just wasn't the Christian way of doing things. Instead, they issued statements and passed around petitions. This protracted process eventually succeeded in winning a modest reform. Christian untouchables were awarded a 1% reservation in institutions and agencies of the state government. At the national level, untouchable Christians and Muslims continue to be denied the advantages of reservations in education and government jobs to this day. Although both Manika Rao and Satyam were untouchable, as well as Christian, neither of them felt any personal stake in the question of reservations for untouchable Christians. They took up the struggle simply because, as communists, they wanted to do something for the oppressed, and they happened to be familiar with this cause. When Satyam and his brother and sister were little, their father tried as hard as he could to shield them from the terrible reality of caste. Whenever he took them to the countryside to visit relatives, he would take a long, circuitous path to avoid running into caste people, before whom they would be forced to take off their shoes and fold their hands and bend their waists. In Gwadivada, Satyam, Carrie, and Papa excelled in school and had many caste friends. They preferred not to think of themselves as untouchable, even when reminded that not everyone shared this perspective. They chose not to dwell on it. Satyam's best friends in high school were the Pinamanini brothers, the sons of a wealthy Kama landlord. Their father had set up an opulent house in Gwadivada for his sons to stay in while they went to school there. Satyam and other friends were often invited. While others went in through the front door, Satyam was made to go in through the back and warned to disappear if the boy's father ever made an unexpected appearance. One had to respect other people's customs. Satyam reflected and thought little of it. In college, Satyam became more self-conscious of his caste, but he was a communist now. As a communist, one was supposed to think only in terms of class and not of caste. When the class struggle was won, discrimination based on caste would disappear. As a communist, Satyam saw himself as an uplifter of untouchables, not as an untouchable fighting for his own rights. He would continue to take this attitude as long as he remained in the movement. Well, I cannot seem to get us to the end of this yet, but I haven't given up. Let's see. Alright, give me just a minute. Scroll out just a little bit. Look at this beautiful. Oh, it's so beautiful. Thank you for being with me and letting me read to you. I did not finish chapter 1, but here's our book again. A reminder. I appreciate you.